Well, g'day, I'm Scott Sanders and welcome to the Reach Australia podcast, which is all about seeing healthy, evangelistic, multiplying churches across Australia. In this season of the podcast, I'm going to be talking with Godwardly from Hunter Bible Church in Newcastle, Sydney. And we split this season up into two sections. In the first part, we want to talk about the big principles of pastoring with purpose. And then in the second section, we want to get down into the detail and look at each of the key purpose areas and try and understand what we're seeking to achieve in each of the purpose areas. So I'm happy that you're with us and I'm looking forward to working into each of these areas. But today, you've pressed play on our first episode of Pastoring with Purpose, and I want to push into the first principle, clarifying your high-level outcome. G'day, Greg. It's good to have you here. Maybe just some people don't know who you are. It'd be great just to give a quick rave on yourself, a bit of history about Hunter Bible Church, and what do you love about pastoring?
Okay, so I'm the lead pastor here at Hunter Bible Church. We're in Newcastle, which is a fairly working class, industrial, almost post-industrial city of about 300,000 people. And we've been kind of banging away here for a little over 20 years. In terms of what I love about pastoring people, I didn't grow up as a Christian, which means I still remember that incredible joy of realizing Jesus died for me. We're in a city where most people have never heard of Jesus. And so the great joy of seeing people get it, just get that Jesus died for them and become Christians, I don't think you ever get over it.
Now, this whole season we're thinking about being intentional, pastoring with purpose. And one of the phrases we're going to talk about lots is ecosystem thinking. Now, I'm feeling a bit nervous talking to you about this because you're a biologist.
Yeah, I'm a marine biologist. Ecosystems are my thing.
That's it, and I'm a lawyer. But as we think about ecosystem, give us the pros and cons of this phrase. What's helpful about it? What's unhelpful?
I think what's really helpful about it is there's a recognition that things are interconnected. So we're often really inclined to break things down to their constituent parts and not see the interconnectedness of them. And you actually see that in the way we've operated. So when we want to get rid of, crop beetles, we introduce the cane toad, not seeing that everything is connected. And that's the really helpful thing about the ecosystem thinking. It's recognizing that whether we know it or not, whether we can see the connections or not, everything in church life actually is interconnected, and it'll either work well together or they'll stumble over each other.
Now, we've been sort of discussing, family. Is family a better way of thinking about this?
I reckon there's different advantages to different images here. So what I love about an ecosystem is you can see that on a barrier reef, everything is actually working together. And so ecosystem really works there. Where it doesn't quite work for me as an image is a barrier reef isn't intentional. It's not actually working toward a purpose. And actually, everything in the barrier reef is selfish. That is, the shark doesn't care about the coral. It just cares about its food. And that's where bringing family in, if family's not an ideal illustration for what we're talking about either, but families can be quite intentional. I want to raise Christian kids. And families are also quite sacrificial. Everyone's pulling together. But together, I think with those two ideas really give us a sense of what we're talking about. Churches are interconnected communities and ecosystems with real intentionality and real sacrificial love. If that's where we go, I think both those illustrations work.
Now, I want to push into the first principle, but just let me give a quick overview of the four principles that we're going to talk about over the next few episodes. The four are, firstly, clarify your high-level outcome, making mature disciples in increasing numbers. We want to have that growth mindset. Second one is look at your discipleship pathway. So helping people move to the right, to use the language of the Vine Project, or next steps, what's someone's next steps. Yeah. Third principle is giving away responsibility and assuming responsibility as the senior leader. So if you're thinking about the team and your role as the chief pastor, the lead pastor, the guy leading the team, but also thinking into that. And then the third area is actually seeing the whole thing as an ecosystem and realising that it's actually the whole thing that sees someone be discipled. So just with that sort of context, I want us to push into the first principle,
Yeah.
clarifying your high-level outcome. Okay, so what is it that we're seeking to achieve? And I want to come at this question by helping us to think into the individual first, because at the end of the day, we're actually about pastoring people.
Yeah.
What does a fully made disciple look like?
It's a great question, and I reckon we often don't even ask that. What are we trying to achieve for our people? So if you ask a lot of us, a lot of pastors, what are you trying to achieve for the people? And they'd probably come up with something like, oh, well, it'd be good if they turned up. It'd be great if they gave. But we can't really locate, I want these particular things. And so we want disciples who are deep in the Word. That is, the Word of God isn't just something that sits on the shelf. It's something that's part of every bit of their life. They love the Word of God. They learn the Word of God. They live it out. They're growing in theology. Someone who's Godward attentive. In other words, it's not just that they've got a relationship with God, but with the Word, but with the God who spoke that Word. And they love Him with all their heart, soul, mind, and strength. We want a disciple who's really engaged in church life. They've recognised that God has not saved them in a bubble. He's saved them into a family, into a kingdom. And that joining a church is not just about what it gives to me, but how we together can all love and serve Jesus. And so they're actually community-minded. Someone who is maturing, someone who's kind of growing to become more like Jesus. Someone who's serving. They're actually engaged in church life so that they're making sacrificial decisions to care for people. That's the picture of the disciple that we're trying to build towards. Yeah.
So, thinking about that individually for the person, what does it look like as you sort of move towards that intentionally and purposefully? Yep. As a church.
Yeah.
So let me just sort of go through each of the purpose areas.
Yep.
Deep in word. So what does that look like as you're talking to your staff team? Give us your 2-sentence rave.
The 2-sentence rave on this for the staff team is, we want people who the Word of God is all through their life. It's in their habits. So reading the Bible is actually a real habit for them, but it's also in their thought life. They naturally think, how does the Word of God come to bear on this? It comes out of their mouths. It's part of their value. So they actually view church as, I'm looking for a church that teaches them the Bible. And so what does it boil down to? The Word of God is all through their lives.
So that seems really intangible. Part of you was hoping you'd say, okay, we've got a preaching program, we've got small groups where the Bible's opened up, and we have a 4-term curriculum, and we're going to work through the Bible in 6 years. Concretise it for me.
Yeah, it can be that, and it's going to become that, isn't it?
Yep.
Those desires are going to shape all of those programs, and that's the thing is, we have these real purposes. And they do end up in programs. And so, it does mean that, for instance, our preaching program, by and large, is going to be expositional preaching. We're going to work our way through books of the Bible. Our community groups, for us, they're about Bible study and dwelling on the Word of God. The way we teach people how to do one-to-one is, it's not counselling, it's opening the Scriptures together. So it does work down into all of those programs. And I think it's... as you're building your program, you're asking, how are we going to be deep in the Word here? Yep. How are we going to be deep in the Word there? If you just start with programs without thinking about that purpose beforehand, you'll just run either the same program you ran last year or the program the guy next door is running that seems to be working without actually considering what's the goal, which is to be deep in the Word.
So Godward attentive, push into that outcome.
Yeah. We want people who really do love God. That idea of a vibrant relationship with God, that they don't live some way because it's right, they live a particular way because it pleases God, and because they love Him. It's the recognition that Christianity is actually relational. It's relating to the Creator who made me and the Father who adopted me. And so it really changes the motives that I live for. I think one of the loveliest things you can ever say to a Christian is, you can please your Father. It's not how you're saved, but being saved, you can please your Father. That's a beautiful thing. And I want Christians to be gripped by this desire not to do the right thing, but to do the God-pleasing thing and to enjoy. What is the chief end of man? To know God and enjoy Him forever. That's Godward attentiveness.
Now, this isn't something that I don't think is part of our tribe.
No.
There's an awkwardness about it. We don't want to get too. I don't want you to get too emotional.
It
here.
feels uncomfortably emotional, doesn't it? Yeah. And there is definitely an emotional element, but there's also a will element to it. So if I'm Godwardly attentive, it's going to change my priorities. It's going to change what I think is important in life. It's going to change my decisions. So I'm going to choose my church before I choose my job. And I'm going to choose the house that lets me do ministry. It really is going to change my priorities and my decisions. I wonder if the way I tend to think about it is there is a relationship that affects my emotions, it affects my will, it affects my decisions, it affects my ambitions, it affects my thought life, but all of it comes back to that relationship with God. Yeah.
That's beautiful. That's really helpful. Okay, now let's think into the corporate life of church. So we want to see a connected, caring community.
Yeah, we want Christians who don't come to church because of what it offers them, which is how most Christians will choose a church. They'll walk in, does the sermon suit me? Does the preaching, the singing suit me? Does it look like there's going to be friends here? They're all reasonable questions to ask, but we want Christians to view church as we are in this together, we're maturing together, we're serving Jesus together. And so it's not just my personal relationship with God, it's our relationship with God. I love the book of Philippians and Philippians chapter 1. I love that. It's that partnership together in the gospel. We're partners in it, and that means we're all growing in knowledge, and we're all growing, abounding in love and knowledge. Yeah.
Again, that's another intangible, area. And again, I'd encourage you to keep on listening and really push into that episode that looks at the corporate life and the community life in church.
Yeah, we're going to do a whole episode of what that looks like, how you build it. Yeah.
Okay. Fourthly, serve. What are you chatting with your serve pastor about?
The big thing that we're always on about is if you're a Christian, you have the privilege of serving. So you're part of the family, you're part of the body with gifts to serve. That's a privilege of being a Christian. And you also have the opportunity to grow to be more like Jesus, who is the servant king. And so it's not just that church has got needs. Church does have needs, but that Christians have the privilege of serving. And we're putting those two together. How do we help Christians to live out being like Jesus so that the whole body is served and the whole body grows together?
Excellent. The final one,
which
mission.
We didn't talk. I
yeah,
didn't mention
I know. I was going to pick you up, but we were working. I was going.
Yeah, isn't that terrible?
How come he hasn't talked about? Is that just because he's assuming it's across the whole system?
Yeah, no. It's the problem of me having bad eyesight, and it's terrible that I'm the mission guy.
But I was happy to leave it because I actually was going to come into it in this conversation here to say, you've got a real question. Where do you put this? So in Rick's book, Purpose-Driven Church, mission is at the end.
Yep.
But you've intentionally, as you often think about it, put it at the front. Now,
Yeah.
important in this is there's not an order to these purposes.
That's right.
The image that I want to keep sort of talking about and encouraging people to think about is of a pentagon, which demonstrates that they're all sort of working together.
Yeah,
and that's the
right.
fourth principle, that you need all of them working together. But it's interesting that you forgot about mission.
The purpose police are going to come and chase me now. For us, how does the church come about? It comes about through the preaching of the gospel. And so that's the reason we put it. So we start with Godward attentiveness because we think that the whole universe was created to be Godwardly attentive. But how does the church come about? Through the preaching of the gospel. And so we want to put it up front. And one of the things that we've really noticed is, the more we talk about mission in our church, the more we generate heat around mission, the more serving and community and Godward and deep in the Word, the more those things really hum. the more we show that the gospel is something going out to the ends of the earth and Jesus is Lord and all of the great truths of mission, the more everything else rides on that and feeds on it. It's interesting. I think Christians instinctively want to be part of a church that's doing evangelism. They may not want to do it themselves, but whenever we say, as a church, we are so on about mission, they're like, yes.
So we want to be part of a church that's doing evangelism, not every member mission. You're careful about saying we want to be part of a church.
Yeah.
That's doing evangelism, that's doing mission.
Yeah, we do it together. Because people are wired somewhat differently. We've got some people in our church where it's going to be a struggle for them to even talk about being a Christian at work. We've got other people who their favourite thing is to go to the local train station and evangelise people on the platform where they wash through. What we say to everyone is, we would love you to go one step further in evangelism than you've ever gone before. But we recognise that that step is different for everyone. And we actually do evangelism together. That's why we build programs that even the person down that end who's going to struggle to be able to tell people about Jesus, we build a program that even they can invite people to.
So thinking about each of those purposes and thinking about the overarching outcome, let's go back to that. We want to make mature disciples in increasing numbers.
Yeah, that's right. What does a mature disciple look like? It's all of those things. But every church isn't just going to be looking at the people who are there. The nature of the gospel pushes us outward. A gospel is something that's to be declared. It's not just something that you believe. It's something that you declare. And so every church ought to be looking at the people within it and saying, yes, here are my people and I want them to be like this. But the gospel itself drives us to be declaring it to the whole world. That's what Jesus talks about in Matthew 28, isn't it? He is the Lord. That means preach it to the nations.
Well, thanks, Greg. That was a great way to kick it off and really land us in thinking about this whole series. So if you've enjoyed this episode of the Reach Australia podcast, I hope that you're going to enjoy the rest of this season. I hope this is actually going to challenge you and really help you think intentionally about your church and the great mission that we've been given of making disciples of the nations. So feel free to share it with a mate or subscribe to other new episodes. Now, this season is broken into two halves, as I said. So we're going to be thinking about pastoring with purpose and kind of look at the engine room, look at the principles that drive it, and ask some of the tough questions. How do you lead a team on this? How do you actually work towards measuring this? So that's the first half of this season. The second half, we're going to jump down into details, look at Godward attentiveness, deep in word, serve, community, and mission. And we're going to understand each of those purposes and work out how to drive them well. Now, if you're looking to move your church towards implementing an ecosystem approach, a pastoring with purpose approach, one practical next step that you can take is to join the Reach Australia Leadership Development Program. The Reach Australia Development Program is a 24-month program to help church leaders and their teams grow their church to become healthy, evangelistic, and multiplying. It includes three main aspects: a full comprehensive church health assessment, 24 months of coaching for you as a leader so that you can implement some of the recommendations that come out of that consultation, and finally, a leadership intensive program as well. We want to see leaders skilled up so they can lead themselves, lead their team, and then lead the church. For more information or to express your interest, head across to reachaustralia.com.au. Well, I'm Scott Sanders. Chat soon.